Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, and particularly welcome to our Mayor, Nick Johnson, who is joining us for our first mayoral question time ever. So welcome, Nick, and we look forward to hearing from you shortly. We have changes for today to our usual officer support arrangements. We don't have Anne Gardiner or Rochelle Tapping with us, but we do have Robert Parkin providing legal advice, Robert Fox doing the administrative role, and Jodie Townsend, new to the Combined Authority, and doing some interim work with us on governance, which is extremely welcome. So thank you very much all for coming. Thank you to the public and press watching online. So I'll start then with the first item, which is apologies for absence and substitutions. So Robert Fox?
Yes, there's two apologies from members. Councillor Mike Davey from Cambridge City Council, who is substituted by Councillor Simon Smith, and Councillor Shaz Nawaz from Peterborough City Council has also tendered his apologies, and he might be replaced by Councillor Amjad Iqbal.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome Councillor Smith to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Declarations of interest then. Does anybody have any interest to declare in any item on the agenda? I'm not seeing anyone indicating. And then the third item is the minutes of the previous meeting, the 25th of October. Are members content with the accuracy of those minutes? Could you please indicate your dissent if you're not? Thank you very much. So those are approved and I will sign those later. So we now move on to item 4, which is the Mayor's opening statement in advance of our asking questions. So I'd like to invite Mayor Nick Johnson to deliver his opening statement in 10 minutes or fewer.
I'll make it easier for you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm looking forward to moving forward with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in a collaborative manner where you feel that you get good answers from myself. I apologise now if any of the questions you raise or any things are of particular concern. I'm unable to give you an answer straight away. I will absolutely go away to my office's directors to help get back answers as quickly as possible. But hopefully you will see this opportunity in the same way that I do. It's the new way of doing things, and if I say it many times, I'll keep saying it. When you bring compassion and cooperation, you build a good community between yourselves as the officers, but it's for the better of the people of Cambridge and Peterborough. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor. That's better, thank you. Okay, so we have a number of questions submitted, half a dozen in fact, and they have been published. They've also been circulated to members and they will be shared to the screen at the meeting. However, as there are only 6 questions, I will invite members to read out their question, invite the Mayor then to read out the published response.
Recording in progress.
And then each member who has asked a question is entitled to ask one supplementary question, which must be related to the substance of the original question and the answer. So that's the ground rules. And first question, the honour goes to Councillor Doug Dew.
You're very kind, Chair. Very straightforward question. Nice to see you here this morning, Nick, as the Mayor. Pleased you could attend. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I can see you now. That's excellent. Now, my question's a very straightforward one. I thought we thought we'd start with this. What are the Mayor's priorities?
Oh, that's a nice one to set me up. Thank you, Doug. And it is genuinely a pleasure to be alongside you again, working together. If I had to put them in sort of 3 themes, I'd probably talk about tackling climate change. I'm absolutely wedded to the idea of better public health outcomes. And 3, reducing wealth disparity across the region. And I think we can only really manage to do that. And I see this as the sort of repeating what I said before. If you embed compassion, cooperation, you deliver for a community across the whole of our region. But as I said, I want to pay a particular attention to a Foresee of climate change. I had the pleasure very recently of going to COP26, and there, knowing very well that the Cambridge and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate Change, as chaired by Baroness Browns, had recently published their final report. I felt I was there to represent the people of Cambridge and Peterborough, and so I'm very pleased that in the discussions I had whilst I was there, I could talk, hopefully and optimistically, that the Combined Authority Board has already endorsed a proposed framework for action to help tackle the impact of climate change. And we cannot ignore the impact of climate change. So it starts with the Combined Authority's own work, but obviously working collaboratively with all partners. So I'm very pleased that the Climate Working Group is set to meet for the first time next month, and I look forward to working with them on implementing those initial recommendations through the creation of an ambitious and comprehensive action plan. So that's definitely one of my priorities, dealing with climate change. So, as you probably know, I am a doctor, and a children's doctor, and probably one of the reasons I decided that I would take action, like many people, we all have our own journeys, but I was frustrated by the fact that when I met children and their families, it seemed to come that their postcode came with a health warning. That can't go on. So for me, I wanted to see a fairer and more equitable spread of health outcomes. The point is that your health outcome is linked to so many other factors: your job prospects, your housing, even the digital connectivity across the region. And for far too long, communities within the north of our region, particularly the villages and town within the Fenlands, have been disconnected from the rest of the region, and they've essentially felt occasionally forgotten about. Though that's through poor transport connections, lack of digital connectivity, and equal job opportunities. So my priority is very much, I want to work to strengthen and reinvigorate those communities and ensure that our communities do not feel that their postcode defines their opportunities. Let's be clear, the devolution deal sets out a goal of doubling GVA, and that is something I absolutely support. In fact, it's probably not ambitious enough, but I believe it will only work through and be enabled through the incorporation of something called life belt economics, which I'm sure in the course of time and through my point of view of the Combined Authority of the next 3.5 years, you will begin to hopefully understand. So finally, part of the improving the quality of life of our communities will involve providing an integrated transport system. Better transport connections will broaden employment and education opportunities for our communities. My priority is to introduce a connected, low-cost light rail connecting towns across the Fenlands, particularly such as Wisbech and March, Peterborough and the remote towns in East Cambs onto Suffolk. I have just come from the Anglia-Ruskin University campus here in Peterborough, and I am excited by the prospect of what is to be delivered here for the wonderful city of Peterborough. We need those improved transport connections between the Fenland towns to Peterborough and the rest of the region. I also believe that with an improved bus network, we will support connectivity for local villages and towns by ensuring that those transport methods are sustainable, frequent, regular, and by placing greater focus on the incorporation of active travel scheme within our transport plans. I hope for a combined authority to take an active role not only against the fight against climate change, but also against the fight against issues of public health. I think I've probably given you enough priorities there. I could keep going on, but thank you for the opportunity to let me speak.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Councillor Dew, supplementary from you?
Thank you, Chair. My supplementary is in two parts. The first part is, I may have missed the boat on this. Lifeboat economics enlightened me slightly. Is it something I've heard under a different name? And the second one is, I applaud the items, compassion, cooperation, etc. You've got in your headline slogan. Obviously, as a scrutiny panel, we'll be wanting to see the strategic direction that's going to take and how we can add value to that, because obviously, as you're aware, with the review we've done recently, we've decided we can't scrutinise everything, so we need to decide what our priorities are to scrutinise as well. And if you could enlighten us on when we could see some strategic directions that we can latch onto and then work collaboratively. My words are not good, still in me, I noticed. Anyway, work together and see where we can take that forward. So if you can enlighten us on those two, that would be tremendous. Thank you.
So the first point of life belt economics. Lifebelt does great things. You have to be on the sweet spot when it comes to using a lifeboat. If you're in the middle, you go through it, and if you go too far away from the lifebelt, you're too far to have your life saved. There are models of economic growth which are essentially onwards and onwards, and we talk about growth. This is one of the roles that we do have to have for the Combined Authority, but it's got to be good growth. It's got to be growth that in achieving and a doubling of the GVA, or indeed more, it doesn't harm the environment. It doesn't harm the actual public health. We talk about more and more cars, we talk about more houses. What that does to the environment, what it does to air quality, we have to make sure that we're balancing up. So if we are putting in new housing, new transport structures, we have to be thinking about our imprint. So that's, if I was to give it another name, most people talk about the donut. But essentially, lifebelt economics is something that in the course of time we will be kind of sharing with our Combined Authority Board. I hope that helps. Okay, well, everybody's got to have their own little sort of frisson. The question you ask in regard, I think, again, I acknowledge that when you are confronted by the idea of what is compassion, what is cooperation and community, and how that can be measured, that is a question that actually comes up in a while. I'm happy to sort of go down that line now. I had sort of prepared it. What can I say about it? We need to kind of look at different measures. At the moment, we're about to put together the local transport and connectivity plan. And within that previous document, there was only one real kind of marker of ensuring that as we developed a local transport and connectivity plan in the past, that you were with, I think it was a number of positions where you were close to a job opportunity. We need to have different markers. We need to look at things like the work that we do about air quality. We need to look at, how close you are to health opportunities, how close you are to a green space. These are things that, not taking away from the importance of the GVA and looking at productivity as a whole, we need to be also managing and measuring other things that are just as important in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move on to our second question, which is from Councillor van der Weyer.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nick. It's sort of similar theme about the priorities, and as you've just restated, you've said your priorities are climate change, public health, financial fairness, and compassion through all of that. As Doug was saying, we as a scrutiny committee need to be sort of looking at those priorities and assessing how well you and the Combined Authority is doing. I was wondering if you could expand a bit on how we might be able to do that, how we can measure your success in this area.
Sorry, I was very conscious that this question was coming up, so I will sort of go back to kind of the way I would sort of submitted. So, I won't get sorry if I keep saying this. If you have compassion for the people around you, for your communities, it enables the better cooperation and it contributes to the creation of those strong communities. We are already integrating the 3 Cs into our policies across the Combined Authority and have made it a defining quality, not just a good idea. It's in our DNA about how we should approach for delivering for the people of Cambridge and Peterborough. So, I have put my priorities to the November board in a refreshed ambition statement for the Combined Authority. This will be subject to consultation alongside the MTFP, the Medium-Term Financial Plan budget. And I am also very keen that the ONS committee should have a look at it and give its views. And I know that officers have suggested to the chair that they would be willing to support a workshop discussion on it. The vision statement, where we talk about the 6 pillars of capital, the kind of sustaining parts of that circular economy, that lifebelt economy, will influence everything it does. What you ask for is measurement. The budget and business plan review flow from this ambition. A more inclusive definition of good growth means, and this is where I think I would like to be measured on, measure me, measure the Combined Authority on a wide range of indicators, such as health and well-being, work with public health colleagues, the state of the environment, and look at the progress on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Add that, air quality. Those figures are out there. You haven't measured against that in terms of the work of the combined authority before. Challenge me. Make me do things better.
Thank you. And a supplementary question, Councillor van der Waal.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've had a look at the ambition statement, ambition strategy that you'll be discussing on Wednesday. So, as you're talking about it here, it's going to be the sort of the highest level statement of your priorities that then we, as the Scrutiny Committee, can look at. And so, I mean, you were talking about the indicators there. I was wondering when will those indicators be produced and looked at? I mean, obviously, when we look at this now, this is the statement itself rather than indicators. And if it is so sort of crucial in your expression of your priorities, should it not be sort of separated from the budget in the sort of so it's clearly a standalone statement of your priorities?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
At the moment, it's sort of part of the budget, and rather than
you mean the statement of intent?
Yes, that's right. Rather
Okay,
than so, as you've talked about it just now, it is the highest level statement of your priorities that we can sort of get our teeth into. So therefore, it's a extremely important document. So at the moment, it's sort of seems to be part of the budget. And then secondly, at what stage can we look at the indicators and start discussing those indicators?
I would say, in regards to things like air quality, you could start measuring them, from this month forward. Look at how we can change things on a month-to-month basis. Things like improvements around, as I say, the quality of people's lives, their mental health and physical health, well-being. And I know that takes longer. And and I appreciate that. I've got 3.5 years before my end of my term of office. There are, of course, things within the proposals, the financial proposals, the medium-term financial plans, such as trying to make more investment in double in nature. That will be something that I can't guarantee now that will have twice as many trees in Cambridgeshire in 3.5 years. But I think you should be looking again at kind of, are the policies that are coming out of the combined authority compatible with the ambition that is stated, particularly in regard to improving and taking on the climate crisis. And I made it clear that when I sit in where Councillor Dupre is now, and I chair a board meeting, I work along with representatives, leaders from all across Cambridge and Peterborough, but within the room there are also representations there from the Police and Crime Commission, Fire, and of course the CCG. Obviously you recognise that health in the way it's provided is changing. Work with the representatives that I do from the CCG and find out where we are going. I'm absolutely wedded to the idea of being more collaborative across all public service. And yes, there will be certain deliveries that I would like to see. If I was to throw one out to you, we are having huge success, as I see it, in regard to a dynamic demand response transport system with regard to the West Huntingdonshire trial. I would like to see that out, as long as it proves that it's viable and it's popular. I would like to see improved bus services across the whole of Cambridge and Peterborough. How you measure that in terms of how many people are using it, how frequently those services are, that will be something that we've got to work with the leaders of the Combined Authority Board. And in terms of just saying at the end of it, we have more buses running, people are using more public transport, and add to that finally, alongside the Hubley push for a public health improvements, is increased active transport as a priority in the plans that we go forward with.
Thank you very much. The third question is mine, and it's as follows. You've said that 2 of your priorities are climate change and financial fairness. What challenges do you foresee in ensuring a just transition to net zero for all communities across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and how will you address them?
Thank you. I'm glad you talked about the just transition, because probably that would encapsulate it in a few words. But look, everybody's talking about levelling up. Maybe that's the phrase that we're all using in politics at the moment. But in terms of the time that I've come into office, I've made it very clear that no one should be excluded or left behind as we move to what is an absolute necessity of a low-carbon future, and we adapt to more extreme climate events. And they're happening here now in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I am lucky, I think, that there is an independent commission on climate which was sort of ready-made for me coming into this role. And it explored the challenges of a just transition, finding that our more deprived communities are amongst the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Recognising that from the start is is getting there. I wholeheartedly support the Commission's recommendations on just transition principles and engaging with those communities. So let's make it clear. I know that residents need good, affordable options so that they can make those changes. As a mayor, I'm trying to do my bit, but I recognise it's harder for others. This is shaping thinking on the refresh of the local transport and connectivity plan, and is an outcome we need to achieve, particularly in that bus service improvement plan. It's not always going to be about funding, but the Commission did highlight the massive scale of public and private investment needed. For too long, the needs of an area have not been properly recognised or resourced. And as one of the most vulnerable areas to climate change in the UK, we need the investment to face those challenges, and I'm taking that up directly with ministers. I will confess, I lie awake at night worrying about water management issues within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We have too little water in the south, and on occasion, as was evidenced last Christmas, across the Great Ouse, too much in the wrong place. That keeps me awake at night, and I will not stop until we sort of are working together across all partnership organisations to make sure that we avoid serious flooding in the future. So addressing the challenge of transition is clearly not easy, but I do it with a just transition by cooperating with fellow board members, councillors and councils. And we have to accept those challenges faced by residents who need their car. Different parts of our county, different ideas, but we can offer them better digital and transport connectivity. And with that integrated introduction of transport network, including a more reliable and sustainable network and very light rail into the Fens and Peterborough, people will want to use public transport as their first option.
Thank you very much indeed. You mentioned flooding and water management, which was one of the questions I was going to ask in my supplementary. You featured transport very strongly in your response, but I wanted to ask how you saw your role and the role of the combined authority, and how you saw yourself using the influence you have in three particular areas that are climate related. The first one is flooding, particularly in the Fens, and that risk. The second one is around reducing the volumes of domestic and commercial waste and creating a circular economy. And the third area is insulation and heating retrofit of domestic properties, where nationally we need to retrofit 1 million homes a year in order to be net zero by 2050.
Councillor Dupre, I feel we're on the same page here. So I say, I do lie awake at night worrying about the issue of particular water management issues. I've been told many times that the role of the mayor means that you have the power of convening, and I'm already pleased that we have put our money where our mouth is by sitting down in committees alongside the Environment Agency. We need to look at how we work with Anglia Water, and we set up a narrative. But again, this will only come, and it's also probably true of dealing with the next issue you mentioned, it has to be in collaboration across the whole of the area. The challenges around water management for Cambridge City, or indeed South Cambridgeshire, and the potential for overdevelopment in those areas and a further damaging of the aquifer and damage to chalk streams, is at odds with the idea that we need to make sure that the water is in the right place in the areas of Fenland. So convening, working towards it, and I will be a champion to as I say, to prevent and hopefully mitigate against flooding in the future in our low-lying fenland areas particularly. In the same way that we have to work together about dealing with water management, and I'm very conscious that, you know, my words will be analysed carefully across the area, we need to look at how we manage domestic and commercial waste. Some of that is already proving a challenge. It's actually in the recommendations in terms of trying to get our fleets to be all electric vehicles. That is a challenge in itself because they're not easily available and the challenges in using them. But if we go down the line of reduce, reuse, recycle, which is the message that I can tell you this now, that children who go to school in Cambridgeshire, Peterborough are told about time and time again, that is something we have to again embed within our own organisation, the way that we behave, the Combined Authority, but trying to reduce the use of waste. I'm not an expert in the area, but I don't know that it's part of my director for strategy. This will be something he would work with closely around things. And I would acknowledge there are good examples of councils in this area who have gone a long way. I regularly am using green, blue and brown bins, black bins, where I live in Huntingdonshire. If there was one thing, if we could do it together, and I've done this because I've spoken to specialists in the area, if as a whole Cambridge and Peterborough could have the same system for collection, the same colour bins, that might be one of the things that would help in terms of the basics, what we can do at an individual level, at a business level. But that will only ever be possible if we get collaboration across all our across the different district and county councils. And in terms of our sort of retrofitting and insulation, we need to do it on so many levels, and hopefully with the push for more and more people to move to maybe heat source pumps, where often when these properties are assessed, the need for improved insulation before they can actually be brought online. I would love there to be an example, and there are certainly things that we are putting forward in terms of the medium-term plan, where we're going to look at programmes and support for care homes, and indeed, if we could, I would love to be part of the bigger picture of, trying to provide that service through the Combined Authority, working with district and county councils about further installation of improved insulation.
Thanks very much indeed. Our fourth question and the final one on your priorities is from Councillor Michael Atkins. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mayor. Following the publication of the Independent Commission on Climate Change report, would you recognise the risk that the Combined Authority becomes a well-meaning talking shop on climate issues, or a well-meaning convener, perhaps? And how will you personally ensure that substantive actions follow the work?
So, a simple answer to that would be no. I don't recognise it, so I should justify my response. The Combined Authority Board has already agreed measures to address the authority's own operations. That's not a talking shop, that's action. This will see the changes to the procurement of goods and services, and new climate projects will be considered in the budget refresh. The fact that we're talking so much about climate already means that it's not a talking shop. This is reality. We're making those changes. We are beginning to look outwards. The board has already backed closer involvement in the preparation of the regional water plan, as I was mentioned earlier, a crucial part of addressing future water supply. More actions are being scoped, and I want to be involved in them, and they will be considered through the usual assurance processes of the authority. I'll refer you to my previous answer on putting the Sustainable Growth Ambition Statement to the board with a wider basket of measures to track the progress. I think you'll like them. At the October board, I was asked a public question about avoiding a climate catastrophe. My answer then, as it is now, is we have a collective responsibility to mitigate climate catastrophe. And although I don't like the word, I appreciate its use as making us focused. I will work with the board, the Climate Working Group and others to safeguard our residents, businesses and natural environment's future. I can only say that I didn't realise how much I cared about the environment over the last 6 months, it has become an absolute focus for me as a leader of the Combined Authority to make sure that we do not ignore what is happening in our county, in our country and around the world. This will not be a talking shop. And if you accuse me of that, I will go heaven and earth to keep making the differences.
Thank you. Supplementary question, Councillor Atkins.
Thank you. I think one could reasonably recognise the risk while saying you're doing a lot perhaps to tackle it. But I'll move on to my supplementary. You've talked a lot about looking outwards as well as within the Combined Authority's own operations. Now, there's an organisation called Cambridgeshire. The CPCA already collaborates with them. And they've recently published polling suggesting that there is now widespread acknowledgement of human-caused climate change. However, their polling suggests that changes in personal behaviour, such as changes in travel or changes in diet, are likely to be met with quite significant resistance by many people. Do you think this is a problem? And if so, what do you think you can do in your leadership role to tackle it?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, the answer to that is I do recognise the problem. I mean, a lot of people have talked about nudge behaviour and how do you get people to change habits of a lifetime. I think if I dealt with the transport thing first, one of the greatest frustrations for me as I have championed the use of zero-emission buses, and I'm delighted that we were able to apply for 30 zebra buses alongside the County Council, is that sometimes people have been a bit sniffy or a bit critical that I believe so much in buses. Well, I can tell you that as a kid growing up in rural Northumberland, more rural than anywhere in Cambridgeshire, that there was a lifeline when, back in the early 80s, buses served the communities. And I could make it very political, but I'll avoid that. With deregulation and changes, buses stopped serving the very people that they, were there to serve. And I am absolutely wedded to the idea that if you can convince people by new initiatives, we can call it Uber for buses with demand response transport. If we create buses that are zero emission, but they are reliable and people want to use them, particularly the most people in the society who have often the least money, it's more accessed more by women in the community, by the children, then I think if they know that there's going to be a bus coming on a regular basis and it's coming at times when they need it, we'll get them to the opportunities for education and transport, they will move. Why would you have a car? No, I'm not anti-car here. I recognise particularly certain areas of the communities and the county will need more reliance on cars. But in other areas, if we can move to a more active travel lifestyles, they will see the benefit. And possibly, I make no secret of my professional training as a doctor. I can see, if people want to trust the doctor, the mayoral doctor, then that will hopefully help. But I genuinely am doing this because I think it's not just for the best for individuals, but I think it's for the best for the whole of the communities. That then takes you on to food. Well, there's a whole, the aspect about there's the personal choices that we make, and there's also the kind of issues of how we work with our agricultural, agritech and farming colleagues. I have been amazed at the innovation, not just in life sciences and that thing maybe that Cambridgeshire is famous for, but within agritech we are in a place where we're moving on. But I also see that the farming community across the whole of our region, they care about the environment. Let's not discount that. Let's talk to the people who work with the soil, work with the nature on a day-to-day basis. If we make it easier for them, we can help them and they can make changes. This is particularly with relevance to kind of peak management. And on an individual basis, well, I would look towards the inspiration from my own family, where challenges around how you prepare your meals on a daily basis, avoiding food waste, and yet, dare I say it, eating less meat and taking up options which are less damaging to the community, not the community, to the climate, then maybe you should lead by example. For the record, I'm not a vegan. I'm not saying I'm going to become a vegan, but I do think there is mileage in changing the way we look at our diet on a day-to-day basis. And if that's something that I can do and influence through the Combined Authority, I will do.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to 2 questions on affordable housing, and the first one is from Councillor Judith Rippeth.
It's good to meet you. Following the loss of a significant part of the housing funds, what continuing role, if any, do you as the Mayor see for the Combined Authority in housing and affordable housing now?
Good to meet you as well, Judith. Thank you for that. I'll read off kind of my prompts that I got at the moment. Look, I'm pleased that we are beginning to hold a much better dialogue with the government. In fact, you know, when I came into the post, it was recognising that what had gone before in a sort of a rather relatively broken relationship, it was imperative on me to speak to Robert Jenrick at the time, and I have had the benefit of having at least one meeting with Michael Gove, the Minister. But I hope, you know, that will transpire into greater confidence and funding support for our future projects. I have noted recently the priority that the government has placed on social rent properties and intend to focus on working with partners to develop policies which will deliver affordable housing to those in greatest need, as well as pushing for more lower-cost homes for purchase through planning gain on new development. The Combined Authority team will also engage in the continuous market engagement process with Homes England as part of their 2021 to 26 National Housing Programme. But I recognise I've been questioned about this now. You know, I'm as frustrated and I have to wait to hear the outcomes of discussion and central government as to how they feel they want to devolve more monies and more responsibility for providing housing in the local area. It has been a source of sort of frustration, and I do believe there is a role. I want to acknowledge the work particularly undertaken by Councillor Lewis Herbert as the kind of lead member for housing, and work along with the team to try and make the most of a difficult situation that I certainly inherited. If we do get more devolved monies from central government, I do, however, see the real focus in delivering hopefully more social and affordable housing.
Thank you very much. And supplementary, Councillor Rippeth?
Apologies. I'm pleased to note that you recognise that need for social housing, which, you know, I expected you to indeed know about and recognise. But your plans seem like they're in very early stages, which causes me a little bit of alarm, because this is an issue which has been around for decades, really. How many homes do you, through the Combined Authority, envisage being able to deliver, and what do you think is a realistic time frame? I have a feeling you might come back to me with you're discussing with government on that, but we'll see.
I didn't realise that reading the Mayor's mind was one of your skills, but you've essentially got to my answer a lot quicker. The point is that I can't make promises for delivering houses if the money isn't coming into the Combined Authority. However, I can promise you that I will continue to work continuously with the department and central government to ensure that they believe that our local areas, and they actually recognise the challenges that we probably all agree about in this room, about the availability of both social and affordable housing in our region. There is, Councillor Herbert, as the lead member, did put a new strategy forward, which has gone through the Housing Committee at the Combined Authority. It is not a case of a lack of ambition. I've certainly talked about that in campaigning as to how important I think the delivery of social housing and affordable housing is in this area. But there is no way I can promise any definitive numbers without knowing how much in the longer term we will get in terms of money from central government.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The final question is from Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Mayor, good morning. What are the reasons that the Mayor cancelled the £100,000 home scheme?
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. So the policy to encourage delivery of units was being overtaken by the introduction of national planning policy, specifically the First Homes policy, which had many similarities to the Combined Authority's 100k homes policy, but is now being rolled out nationwide. Maybe it's for others to explain, but as I understood it, the objectives of the 100k homes programme were definitely worthy, but the scale of the delivery, as I saw it before I was elected, was very limited, and the funding resources that enabled the loans to deliver the majority of the 100k homes opportunities are now no longer available. It obviously attracted concern from central government as well. I recognise that the National First Homes policy, which came into effect for all planning authorities from the 28th of June 2021, goes a long way to addressing the demand for affordable housing for sale. This has reinforced my opinion that the combined authority is correct to step away from the 100k homes policy and allow the government to deliver first homes at scale directly through the local planning authorities. As I said before in the previous question, I absolutely remain committed to the, personally committed to the principles of sociable and affordable housing, and instead I am pledging with the cooperation of local house builders, planning authorities and the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities to work with the Combined Authorities Housing Team on tried and tested housing policy and explore new opportunities to deliver the affordable and social housing that the people of Cambridge and Peterborough so desperately need. I intend to build something that places communities, the sustainable principles I talked about, and affordability at the heart of that programme.
Thank you very much. Supplementary question, Councillor Sharp?
Thank you, Chair. You've answered part of my supplementary question already, I think.
Thank you.
You've extended your written answer. Obviously, I understand the government have picked up the 100k homes scheme, and it seems to be very similar to ours, just rebadged. But you mentioned about getting planning gains from future developments. Obviously, that means working with the 5 constituent planning authorities, or 6, sorry, including Peterborough, planning authorities around the county and Peterborough. I just wondered how you're going to try to achieve that, or are you looking at shared ownership, or these sort of, just maybe trying to flesh out a bit more on your answer, please?
I really wish I could give you more answers, but I'd really have to bring in my Director of Housing and lead member, who would probably be able to give a more authentic and inclusive answer. I will absolutely acknowledge that the thorny description of where we are in terms of the combined authority around tackling housing, let's call it a housing crisis, is still unclear. It's not through want of engaging with with central government, but I've sat as a chair for the board, and it has been the question has been said, well, what is the point of the combined authority when it comes to kind of dealing with this problem from the representatives of the board, because they, I think, have also questioned that longer term plan. We are in a state of flux. We are still awaiting the kind of direction of desires and from central government as to how they see the combined authority being forward, and as such, I don't think I can give you any more answers. But I will try and get something more substantial to you sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor. That comes to the end of the questions for the first mayoral question time. And I'd like you now, moving on to item 6, I'd like to invite you to make a closing statement.
So I did apologise, I didn't realise I had an opening and a closing statement. You put a lot of effort into, well, we all do as representatives from across our region. I don't pretend that compassion and cooperation and community are just the mayoral values. I see it in many of the ways that you individual councils work and individual councillors do on a day-to-day basis. The problem for me has often been that we often talk about cooperation. In fact, I'd argue that at COP26 there was lots of talk about cooperation, but people are forgetting the compassion. People say that talking about compassion is a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's values. For me, it is a strength. And every time I come before you, I will not apologise for reiterating that the direction of travel that we are doing in the Combined Authority is because we care. And I know you do too. So you scrutinise me as much as possible, because if I'm not doing the job properly, I want to know it, and I want to be held to account, and I will come back to you as often as I need to.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor. Thank you for your attendance today and for answering our questions. You've very publicly set yourself some challenges and set the Combined Authority some challenges, and I think you've also set us as an Overview and Scrutiny Committee some challenges, and we will be rising to those challenges, I am absolutely sure, and will be on the lookout, and we'll be coming back to you with more questions at a future date. Not least, personally, I will want to come back to you a lot on lifebelt economics. The next question time will be on 25th of March next year, and that will be the first public Mayor's Question Time. So we will be considering arrangements for that event and publicising those a little nearer the time. So thank you very much indeed, Mayor, for being with us today. So, the second part of item 6 on our agenda is following the question and answer session with the Mayor to ask you whether there is anything that has been raised during the questioning today that you would like to bring to the attention of the board on Wednesday. Anything arising out of what we've just heard. Councillor Miscandlin.
The thing I'd like to bring forward is the affordable housing aspect of developers. Developers don't want to supply affordable housing to anybody because it cuts into their profits, especially the big companies. They employ very expensive lawyers to fill out forms that get away with this viability studies that are carried out. So this is an issue, and it's not just an issue in Fenland, it's an issue everywhere. That needs to be addressed because the developers do not wish to build affordable housing or shared housing or restricted building programs with cheaper housing for local. They don't want it. So I think we need to look at getting the developers to be more cooperative in supplying affordable housings to the public because they don't want to at the moment. And I can tell you that after sitting in the chair for 7 years at Fenland District Council. We know this as a fact, and anyone sitting around this table, around this room, knows exactly the same thing. The viability studies are skewed towards the developer not supplying those products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else that anybody feels arising out of today that needs to be brought to the board's attention? Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Jenna. It comes from your own question, the answer about waste, and the Mayor's plea, if you like, that we all use the same colour bins. This is something that has no doubt exercised us all, and the difficulty in delivering the same sort of process in each area, because obviously there have been negotiations. But do we need to bring this as a specific element to our work in terms of seeing whether we can scrutinise that and to get explanations from all of the constituent councils about their direction of travel towards an integrated domestic waste and trade waste processing policy?
Thank you. That sounds an eminently sensible idea. I know there are government changes afoot anyway on bringing a sense of commonality to domestic waste collection arrangements, so that might fit in there. Councillor van der Weyer.
Yes, so my supplementaries are partly about the indicators that seem to be envisaged by the growth ambition statement that's being discussed at the board. It might be because I've only sort of read the papers and haven't really discussed it properly that I've misunderstood the process, but there don't seem to be any indicators outlined at this stage, and it's not clear to me when those indicators will be proposed by the Combined Authority. I think it's something for them to come up with rather than us. So obviously, if we're going to scrutinise the effectiveness of this strategy and how the Combined Authority meets its priorities, then we need to know what the indicators are to do that. obviously, so that's, we can input that into the consultation, but I would hope that the board will be able to discuss this matter as well on Wednesday.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. Listening to the Mayor, and forgive me, I may be wrong myself here, but listening to the Mayor, he was talking about he can't really do any housing schemes until he knows how much money is coming from the government. I thought it was the other way round. I thought we had to take some housing schemes to the government to try and procure some money. I thought there was... I was confused by the answer, to be perfectly honest with you. I understand at the last board meeting, the leader of the housing committee was very damning of the fact that they had missed out on some money. I'm not so sure that we've got enough focus on this. I think this is something, you know, he's highlighted housing as, and we've asked questions on housing. I just almost got there's jam tomorrow if we can find some ideas to go with it, but we're waiting on the government. I genuinely thought we had to be the spark to get that money.
If I can just come back on that, I'm not sure that's entirely correct. We were allocated at the beginning of the previous mayor's term of office a £100 million pot over 5 years for areas outside Cambridge, with a separate pot for Cambridge. That £100 million pot, we have now had word from the government that we will receive no more than 3/4 of that. So it'll be up to, and the phrase is up to, about 73.5 million. So we know that we will fall short by at least 25% of that amount, and probably more. So that's the constraint that we're operating in. It's not that we go to the government to ask for more money up to the 100 million. We know for a fact that the government has told us that we have lost at least 25% of that pot. And we also have been told, as I understand it, that there are no plans to replenish that pot, certainly not at the moment, and not just for us, but I believe for no other combined authorities either. So that is the constraint that we find ourselves in, that the government has cut short the original pot and said there will not be another. So I'm not sure that it is down to us to come up with other projects. It may be that there will be other arrangements put in place, other schemes of money. But at the moment, what we're being firmly told, as far as I'm aware, is that that's the situation we're in. And I stand to be corrected on that, but I'm not sure that there's much we can do about that. So then we had Councillor Bagent next.
Thank you. As in so many of these things, we see the mayor doing things that district and county councils are doing, and Peterborough Authority. In particular, regards to the retrofitting and insulation that's going on. This is a new issue, relatively new, to all councils. And it would be so much better if we had one central focus. Now, clearly the mayor is there to be a central focus, but one can't help feeling that this, regarding housing, rests more with district councils. And it would be interesting to ask for a comment from the mayor on how he may actually push his authority downwards to help the local councils to actually, because without real funding this can't be done, and so we're looking for government funding, and it would be not the right way to do it for that funding to be spread amongst a whole list of councils, and the mayor could use his facilitating facilities to press government to send this money to local authorities more than to be coming towards him. You know, he's got enough to be worrying about, and we have a more local knowledge on these things.
Thank you very much. The power of devolution, the power of convening, he called it, which I thought was quite an interesting phrase. Councillor Smith was next, then Councillor Dew, then Councillor Rippeth, and Councillor Sharp.
I have to say I share the frustrations that have just been expressed about the delivery of affordable housing to meet the needs of people in greatest housing need. And I'd like to speak to the Mayor's power of meeting ministers, because a lot of government policy doesn't really support the
bottom line of meeting people's housing needs, and those are who are the least best off in our society. So when you look at first homes, the local plan requirement now is to ensure that 25% of the social housing, the affordable housing provision, goes to first homes. It's very worthy, and who would argue against subsidising new households' first homes? But what it does is it displaces the provision of social housing for rent and for the intermediate housing as well. So it's cakeism. When we look at build to rent, that only provides for 20% affordable. But when you look at what affordable means, it's a discount of 20% to the market rent. But within those schemes, those houses have, or those dwellings have, an 11% premium to the market. So exactly how much discount is going on there, and these developers are getting away scot-free from their affordable planning obligations. And there is no limit to the size of these schemes. They can, and the government has described them as a new asset class. Homes for people, an asset class. It's disgraceful. And then we still have the right to buy. Again, a very popular policy, and who wouldn't argue about someone having the right to buy their own home that they've rented for years and years and years? But we're swimming against the tide. In Cambridge City, we're building new council houses, but as quickly as we can build them, our stock's being sold off as well. And all of this results in a rising bottom line for government expenditure of housing benefits. It just keeps spiralling and spiralling at the cost of the taxpayer. So all of these subsidies, all of these gimmicks actually just end up costing us money and leaving people in housing misery. And when it comes to local plan policy, I really do share the comments made by my colleague from Fenland District Council. These policies should be absolutes. They shouldn't be negotiable, because it's quite right. Clever developers with clever lawyers, always negotiating, weaving around the rules, resorting to case law, running rings around local authorities who can't afford the experienced planners that they can. And we just turn to retrofit. It is a monumental problem that we face. We've calculated it will cost £500 million to retrofit the council stock in Cambridge City alone. What we do need to do is tackle that problem, but we also need to support owner-occupiers as well. We know there are people willing to retrofit their homes, but we've got to provide them with support and advice and access to the trades that they can do this job. Because at the moment it's such a complicated process. I think it's called cognitive dissonance, the sense that, yes, I'm willing to do it, but it's so difficult, I can't do it. And we need to act as public policy and public servants to address that, so that we can accelerate retrofit programs across all housing tenures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dew.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, following on from those comments, I would agree with many of them, but one area we've got to be particularly careful on when we're looking at developers is, at the moment, there's this drive to force all the rules down at every level. And if you're not careful, the large developers who can afford the expensive, clever solicitors will drive out of the market the small developers that we so want to encourage in our region. So I think if we're going to do that, we need to have a differentiation. It strikes me as uniquely unfair that, you know, a large developer with, say, building 1,000 houses on an estate can somehow argue he doesn't have to provide his 200 affordable houses and can only afford 50 of them, whereas a small developer can't afford someone of the same ilk and is having to provide 2 of his 10 houses on other areas. So I think we need to be careful that we don't drive the small developers into the sea with our desire to work or encourage the larger ones to work with us, and that's the same everywhere. Going on to the thing that was mentioned about retrofitting, I have a friend who's German, and when I was talking to him about the fact we've got this great push now for ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps, the one thing he said to me, he said, if you do that, you're all going to be very cold. And that comes back exactly to what's just been said. If we don't do the retrofitting, that heat we're going to create is going to escape so quickly. You know, it's very much part of the same picture. But what I really wanted to speak about, which is slightly different and we haven't picked up, is the Mayor mentioned that he'd convened meetings regarding flooding issues. Now, I'm getting confused now as to who is actually leading on flooding, because a lot of us sit in different councils, and my district council thinks it's leading. I know the county council that I sit on with, a few of them think they're leading, and now the Mayor thinks it's leading. Who the heck is leading? I don't mind who does it, but I do think actually it is of a regional capacity, and it probably should sit with the Mayor and be driven down and up. You know, but he's in a better position to a certain degree than dragging, you know, to get people like Environment Agency to the table and talking sensibly. So I think we ought to, you know, follow that up more, because I think it's eventually going to be the route that's going to work. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Rippeth is next.
Quite a lot of what I was going to say has been covered, but I think our job here with my question is it could get kicked into long grass, because he did say, oh, I'm talking to government and I need to know like what the plans are, but he needs to use his, you know, negotiating skills to make sure that money is forthcoming, and I would say distributed to each district council, you know, each area, because the local planning authorities in Cambridgeshire have the experience of delivering these homes, and obviously with more funding we can also prove that we've done it and we know how to do it. And there is, I know he couldn't give me promises, and I don't want promises when he can't promise, but there is a time frame. Is basically this should have happened yesterday and so we need it to happen, you know, quickly, so we need to keep that pressure on. Yeah, that was all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Just to touch on a couple of points, I'm not sure, are we talking about the board agenda as well at this stage, or briefly, or?
I've been having exactly that conversation with officers just at this moment. I think we're gathering a lot of material here, and I'm not sure that in the middle of a public meeting is the best place to start sifting through the detail of that information. But I do think what is worth doing is capturing all of this in a note, so that we have got the points charted out that have been made, and then if we can circulate that to all members with a suggestion beside each point that's been raised as to the best way in which we can deal with those. Some of those may be by means of trying to feed into board discussions on Wednesday. Some of them may be issues for our own work programme. Some of them may be issues for the longer term. Some may be things that are already on our timetable to look at, such as the briefing we're going to be getting on the sustainable growth and budget, for example. So I think with your consent, and I'll come back to you for your actual comments, Councillor Sharp, with your consent, I think the best way forward is to capture everything that has been said, spend a bit of time today, maybe tomorrow morning, going through all those and working out the best way to proceed with those points and circulating that to you for your approval. Does that sound like a sensible way to do things? I don't want a lot of this to get lost. Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. Yes, my points were not so much around questions for the board, but more about having looked through it. I can see work that I think we need to be getting involved in. But I'll go back to housing issues, and Councillor Bagent's comments were right. What I was trying to tease out of the Mayor, which I didn't really get an answer to, was that how is he going to work with planning authorities to achieve the he was talking about low purchase cost houses, things like that. I was trying to get an idea how that was going to work, and I didn't really get that. But I understand maybe he did promise we'll get that sometime soon, so we'll wait. And my two thoughts around just looking at the agenda was, one, I know we're looking at the budget in detail next month, so I won't talk about that, but there's a paper around the adult education budget, and I was looking at seeing how that fed into the budget. And the third thing is, and I know you're looking at the devolution deal, Councillor Dupre, and it was really table 7.3 on the board agenda that, in terms of jobs target, that looks that we're way below target or we're way below the line. So those are more thoughts, I think, for future meetings, really, rather than questions at this stage of the board.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Coles, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it just struck me the question is one of a philosophical one, the Mayor's philosophical position. I'm grateful for the explanation between Lifebelt and donut economics, but how that's going to apply to all of the work that the authority is going to do and how we therefore reflect on scrutiny of that, I think is quite important, and how it links into compassion, community and cooperation. I think what we do need is to have our own meeting to understand all of that, to understand the underlying philosophy, and then how we can apply it to what we know to be the more day-to-day business about skills and transport and housing. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much indeed. I concur with that. I think that's a really important thing for us to do. Okay, is there anybody else that wants to... Oh, Councillor Atkins, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd appreciate some advice either from Chair or from the officers. In response to my question, clearly the Mayor is putting quite a lot of weight on this climate change working group that he set up. So there isn't a formal committee in this space like there is for housing or skills, but there's now going to be this working group which is going to meet for the first time in a couple of weeks, he said. Obviously, I'm currently the lead member for scrutinising climate change. I'm not sure what the best practice approach is to interacting with a group like that. I mean, do I sort of sit and wait and see what they bring ultimately to the board? Do I kind of stick my nose in their own meetings and see if they're kind of on the right track, or if there's anything that's concerning that I need to bring back to this committee? I think it's just because there isn't an established committee structure, it's a bit more opaque as to how we best scrutinise what he's clearly laid out is quite a significant priority for him.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question, and I'm turning to officers for advice on the governance arrangements for what I believe is a climate change leaders group, I think is what it's called, and how we as a committee and Councillor Atkins as our climate change rapporteur can interact with that leaders group and its deliberations. Is anybody in a position to take that on now, or do we want to take some time to think about that and come back?
Thanks, Chair. No, I think I want to come back on that, but the spirit of the CFGS report was very much about engagement at the optimum time, so early discussions to shape and influence and challenge effectively. So I think with that approach in mind, we'll want to just get a handle on exactly how that group's going to work and how it's envisaging reporting, but also to give our lead member in this setting an opportunity. So could we undertake to come back to firstly yourself, Chair, and then the committee?
I think that would be very helpful. Do we know whether the leadership group on climate change is going to meet in public? No, I think that needs to be covered as well, because the way in which that works and the accountability will be quite important, I think, for many of us and for the community more generally. Okay, so if we can wait then for a note round on all of the issues that have been raised, that will be extremely helpful, and we can decide where to go from there. So is there anything that we think in that might want to affect our work programme at item 7? Is there anything that immediately needs to fit into that? We've all had the work programme, and we've had the 2 scoping reports. I'm hoping, sorry, the lighting seems a bit random, sort of a slow motion disco. Oh, right, okay, thank you. Yes, I'm hoping to bring back something of a more detailed report based on my scoping report on the devolution deal to the December meeting. That's setting myself an incredibly ambitious target, but as the update report on the devolution deal goes to the board in January, I wanted us to be on top of that and proactively inputting into that and having some kind of a positive to and fro dialogue. I'm due to have a second meeting with the director for that piece of work tomorrow. That'll be my second meeting with him, so I'm hoping that we can get a good collaboration and a good forward-looking piece of work out of that. But I think the publication date will be a week ahead of the 13th, won't it, at least? So 13 minus 7 is 6. It would be around the... I think it's the 3rd, isn't it? Is it the Friday? It is the 3rd, so that's scarily soon. Councillor Atkins, were you indicating?
So just to say, so the second scoping document is for work that I'm intending to undertake in the climate change and environment space. I think this kind of links into the board agenda for Wednesday, where they're considering the sort of second and final set of recommendations from the Independent Commission on Climate Change, and there's a sort of draft action plan associated with it. I think it's going to be interesting to see when this working group meets. I know there have already been calls for these action plans to be made slightly bulkier. When I'm clearer about their programme of work, then hopefully I can present a kind of complementary timeline to the committee about when I can report back on their work and kind of how it's going. If there are any other members who are particularly interested in this space and would like to be involved in this work, then obviously please let me know. There's going to be plenty to get stuck into. And if you have any concerns, you can always email me directly.
Thank you very much. Councillor van der Weyer.
Yes, I just glanced at the programme and the items for next month. So we've got the budget consultation, but as I said to the Mayor, the growth strategy is sort of, as it's being presented at the board, is just sort of tacked onto the budget, which certainly doesn't sit well with me. So when we're approaching it, whether it's one item or two items, when we're approaching it next month, I think we need to try and give each of them their due attention in some way.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. My computer has just chosen to die on me, so if someone could one of the officers please be very helpful and read out the budget, the business items, the work programme for December and for January, so that we're all clear on that.
So the 13th of December, the meeting will be at New Shire Hall in Alconbury, and the items on the work programme are, of course, apart from the usual minutes and public questions, declarations, etc., ONS arrangements update, conflicts policy, and budget consultation. And January, the meeting is on the 24th of January at Fenland District Council, and again, budget consultation is on the agenda, and the Mayor will be in attendance in his role as the Chair of the Transport Committee, and particular focus there on the bus reform and the LTCP.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bagent.
Did I hear right that it will be at the Shire Hall in Alconbury, is that?
December, yeah.
For December, yes.
Yeah, that's not so easily for everybody to get to. If you haven't got a car, you're almost precluded from being there. I'm not saying you can't get there by public transport, but it's 2.5 hours from Cambridge. Is that a wise place to be holding our meeting?
Many of us ask that question of ourselves on an ongoing basis, Councillor Bagent, I can assure you.
I know, but is it not within our remit to decide where we're going to meet?
Is there a view that you wish to ask officers to seek to change that booking? I'm conscious that we are fairly short on time to do so. It's only a few weeks away. Councillor Hay.
Personally, I find New Shire Hall is more convenient for me. It's one of the closest.
I'm sure that will be true of every venue for somebody, but it is well known for its lack of public transport connectivity, which is the concern that was being raised. And we did specify early on when we considered venues a few meetings ago that that was an important criterion to take into account.
Just point out also the February and April meetings are scheduled for New Shire Hall.
That's really odd in view of the criteria we set ourselves. I'm going to take a straw poll at the moment with regard to December only. Could I see those in favour of asking officers to find an alternative venue instead of New Shire Hall for December, if that is possible at this late stage? I'm seeing 1 hand, 2 hands, 3, 4, 5. I'm seeing a geographical issue arising here. Can I see those against looking for an alternative venue at this stage? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Huntingdonshire, Fenland and Peterborough against looking for a new venue.
I've got a 2 o'clock county meeting at Shire Hall that day, so for me, logistically, that's the reason I'm voting.
Yes, Councillor Coles.
I'm just thinking it's going to be quite difficult to get a booking this far down the track. Maybe we could do something in terms of car share or something to support those who would have therefore to travel in on private transport rather than public transport, just for that one. But I think in terms of the future ones, when we should be rather better set up.
Councillor Bagent.
Chair, whilst I fully acknowledge that we will have to do that if we're going to attend the Scrutiny Committee, it isn't something that we should need to do. This combined authority supports an active travel plan. There is no active travel method of reasonably getting to Shire Hall.
I think what we've heard is that it's probably that there is a view which I accept is geographically skewed against changing the December location at this stage. But I do think we need to take back and ask officers to take away the question of the use of New Shire Hall for the future, particularly given that we're being told that that's the venue for February and March, given the well-acknowledged issues with public transport to get there. Councillor Atkins.
I'm afraid I can only offer half a solution, but perhaps Cambridgeshire County Council could share the details of the shuttle bus that operates at least in the mornings, which might be a convenient way to make the start of the meeting, which runs from Cambridge City Centre out to New Shire Hall. It wouldn't be much good for getting back, but it would at least get members from Cambridge City Centre out to Alconbury. If they're allowed to use it, that is. I don't know.
It is, as I understand it, it's available for public use. However, my anecdotal evidence of it, having heard from other people, well, we know for a fact it only operates once a day in each direction. So if you rely on that to get there, I think you end up tipping up at New Shire Hall at about 9 a.m, which is a bit of an irritant for a 10 o'clock meeting, although there is a very nice restaurant immediately opposite New Shire Hall, which does a very good breakfast. However, if you were to rely on that method to get home, I think you would have to wait until 5 p.m, and I'm sure members are not going to be prepared to do that. I think that the more realistic option is going to have to be some kind of car share arrangement or being picked up from various park and ride stations along the route or whatever. I could pick somebody up from St Ives, for example. So I think for the next meeting, if we could arrange among ourselves and perhaps the officers can assist to gather a list of people who need transport and a list of people prepared to offer it, that we'll have to manage as best we can for December. But for the future, I do want officers to go away and look at this again, because I think it will not be satisfactory. Councillor Bagent.
Just briefly, Chair, comrades and colleagues will agree that I'm making a political point here and accept that and acknowledge it. we are being asked, and I really appreciate what you've said, and I understand that we can facilitate to go, I can jump in somebody's car, but that isn't the business that we're in. We're in the business of climate change. We're in the business of reducing climate change. And I hope that if there's anybody from the press listening to this, they hear the point that I am making. How can we, as members of a scrutiny committee for the combined authority, accept that we're going to meet in somewhere which is not only not able to be reached practically by bus or by bicycle? How can we agree to do that without raising a protest? And I appreciate everybody's been very kind, and we'll move it perhaps for the next one. But this should not be happening.
Thank you, Councillor Bajan. Your points have been taken on board. I can assure you of that. We are where we are with regard to December. Now, I think Councillor Dew indicated to speak, and then Councillor Goldsack.
Yeah, it's only a very quick one on the back of that. I appreciate where Dave's coming from on this, and you know, he's making a point that he thinks is well made. I mean, we've got the reverse situation also true of, you know, if I'm going to use green travel or active travel to get from where I live to March, for example, if I leave home on 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, I can catch the one bus that leaves my village in the week and return home the following Friday. So we've all got issues that can catch us out, and you know, it's difficult. And I think one of the things that's coming out of what we heard earlier is looking at, you know, these various active travel plans and various transport plans coming forward. Hopefully we won't be having this discussion for too long in the future. I mean, it does need looking at. And also the issue of Alconbury as it develops will change as well, as more and more facilities move in there. You know, one of the things the whole thing was sold on in the first place was the fact that it needed to be a transport hub, and you know, to my immense disappointment, it's anything but at the moment. You know, and the original plan was that the guided busway, or whatever it's called nowadays, it changes its name regularly, but the one that runs, you know, to St Ives, the original thought was it was going to catapult out and end up going up via Alconbury up to here. So hopefully I look forward to seeing something like that in the future. But we are where we are, and as I say, it's difficult, you know, for various reasons. If you live in the city, it's great, you can get around and use active transport. But if you do live out in the sticks, I mean, I'm not in the best of places, but some of the guys out in the middle of Fenland have got to be, you know, probably leaving 2 weeks before and then coming back. So, as I say, I think it's good, and I think, you know, Dave's made his point and made it well, and I think the fact he's going to be gracious enough to let one of us to give him a lift next time will actually solve it for that, and then officers have had their instructions. Thank you.
Thank you. It is interesting, actually, that Fenland's council chamber is probably one of the most accessible by public transport for most of us, but there we go. So I'm sorry, it was Councillor Goldsack next, and then Councillor Miscandlin.
Yeah, when we last met here, I remember Councillor Bajan and Davey coming on the train, and unfortunately I think you were late because there were issues with the train, and actually the trains were cancelled that day, so you gave a lift home. You got a lift home with somebody. To get to Alconbury, have to drive past the A14. I'd use the A14. I join at Newmarket. I will come past Cambridge. I will willingly meet you at any point along that adjacent there to give you a lift, or give you a lift home to the meeting if you want to use the bus that comes from central Cambridge. I offered at the time, and I think somebody else could get you there sooner. But I'm more than happy to do that. Just drop me a line, and I can pick you up at. Well, if I have to come into Cambridge, I will, but if not, I can pick you up at Quay or Milton or anywhere like that en route.
Thank you. I'm not sure it's good use of time, particularly with the public watching, to be making our carpool arrangements in public session. Perhaps if we could move on from that, but it's a kind offer. Councillor Miscandlin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I agree with the problems that other members have seen. I live in very rural areas, as just been mentioned. I have no option but to use motorised transport. I really don't, because if I go to Fenland, I live out in the middle of nowhere, so therefore I have to use transport. So for me to use a bicycle would be either foolhardy or dangerous, so therefore I use my own car, and I will continue to use my own car. And if it comes down to it, I'll use my motorcycle as well.
Thank you very much. I think we have done that subject more than justice now. So, yes. So that was, surprisingly, the work programme. Councillor Goldsack.
Apologies, Chair, but there's no mention on the work plan. I have sent to you and the Vice Chair the response from the new Chief Executive as to accommodation. I didn't know whether that's something you wanted on there or whether we deal with that in a different manner. So, but now's the time to raise it.
Thank you for drawing my attention to that omission on my part. Yes, would you like to say a little about where we are with your inquiry?
Willingly, if now the time to do it. Yeah, I took an action on behalf of this committee to speak to the new CEO about her strategy for CPCA accommodation. I've shared with the Chair and Vice Chair, and I'm waiting for guidance, if I'm honest, as to when and where I can share. They are considerably further down the line than I was expecting them to be. I was very encouraged by what I heard. Very encouraged. The one thing I'm sure I can share with you is they hope to have some decision made by Christmas in time for a spring occupation. And there are designed preferences as to where this would be, and it'll probably be to nobody's surprise that it is in a existing authorities building as a subtenant or something like that, and approximately in the area, I'm going to get this right now, from St Ives to Oakenbury, I think that kind of area. With your, I mean, I'm waiting on your guidance, Chair, but with your permission, I'll very happily send it out to the committee. But I was blown away by the response that I got. Very, very impressed.
That's very encouraging news, considering that when I asked the question on your behalf at the board when it met here a couple of months ago, we were told there was no accommodation strategy at all, so they've clearly moved on quite a lot since then. I think it might be helpful, might it, members, to have a short paper to the next meeting, just our December 13th meeting, outlining where we are, so that we can round that subject off as far as possible. And please do assure us, Councillor Goldsack, that the venue in question will have public transport access. Otherwise, I know what half an hour of every meeting is going to be. So are members happy with that way forward for a short paper on 13th of December outlining where Councillor Goldsack's inquiries have led? Yes? Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Chair, can I just ask, and please don't think I'm being daft here, you want me to write that short paper, or are you going to ask the officers to write a short paper from their papers?
I think if you remember, the description of the role of a rapporteur was that it was to be self-servicing.
That's fine.
I'm sure that if you wanted to draft something, officers, or draft some bullet points, officers could assist in putting that together.
That's fine. I'm comfortable
format.
doing it. I just didn't want to tread on an officer's toes if it was going to duplicate.
Right, okay. Perhaps if you could liaise with Robert Fox and
Okay.
Jodie behind the scenes, then we can work out how that is done and how that's presented to us. That would be good. Thank you very much. Now, just one final thing that is not quite on the agenda, but we have alluded to it, so I will give some latitude here. There is the board meeting on Wednesday, and if anybody had anything that they felt we needed to ask the board related to something that is on their agenda that cannot be dealt with in another way, then I'm willing to hear it. No? Okay, thank you very much. So then the last item on the agenda is the date of the next meeting, 13th of December at 11 a.m. at Newshire Hall, Alconbury, carpooling arrangements to be decided, and it is my birthday, so I will bring donuts. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance today.
Were they life belts or donuts?
Depends how big they are.